Welcome to Babylcom 5.
So, this one has been a very, very long time coming. Nearly a year and a half ago now, I've just been to check, I got hold of this, which is a Revell Babylon 5, which obviously has now had a bit of work done to it. Now, this didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Let me be frank about this, okay? Because that's kind of the reason for doing this video. It's a little bit of a cautionary tale, I suppose, in the sense that when I sent this away to get painted and put together, I probably made assumptions about how it was going to be done that were off the mark because I'd never done this before. So I'd never asked somebody to do something like this before. I also rather assumed that they'd done something like this before. And the guy who did it is a very, very skilled gentleman. And this is what happened was purely down to a lack of communication on both our parts, really. Because I think he made certain assumptions, I made certain assumptions, and that sort of thing can often lead to a lot of problems when you're trying to do something that is very personal to you, but not necessarily personal to the other person. So let me give you some background. Richard Ashton is well known to those who are sort of even vaguely aware of science fiction modelling, I think it's fair to say, because he does do some incredible, quite large-scale reproductions of very famous spaceships and things like, Jerry Anderson models and that sort of thing. So when I went to collect this, it was apparent that he had a couple of quite big stingrays on the go. He had a Liberator from Blake 7, all sorts of stuff. There was actually a Battlestar parked next to this when I went to collect it. Firefox, all sorts of stuff going on. And where he works is actually not where you might think he works, but I'll keep that to myself because I think that's a sort of it's not a secret, but it's a tale that's really for him to mention to people who ask him, I think. And we'd been communicating through Messenger, and I gave him the model to do in sort of July of last year in 2023, and it's now March 2024. And I knew he was busy, and he'd had some health issues as well, which meant that he couldn't work for a period of time over the course of the time that he'd had it. So I wasn't pressuring him time-wise at all. But then when he sent me the first photo, I sort of looked at it and I went, that's not quite what I was expecting. So the base was kind of done, but at the front here, all there was a sort of a couple of strips of stickers, and there was a blank here, and then a sort of a blank either side of those stickers. And he'd said to me at the start that he looked at source material when he was doing his builds. So I thought that what I was going to get was a Babylon 5 that looked exactly as it did in the TV show. But as it turned out, the source that he'd looked at was someone else's construction of the model. And that person had not painted the model in the same way that he would. And so when he didn't see anything in the front of it, I think he kind of assumed that was how it was supposed to be and didn't think anything of it. But the problem was that I, knowing the show as I do, immediately went, oh my God, what's that? So that combined with the sort of day that I'd had immediately prior meant that I had quite a negative reaction. And I just sort of said, I'm sorry, but that's not what I was expecting when you said you were going to go back to the source material and do it as it was in the show. And then he sort of took that on board. He'd had another stab at it, And then I had issues with the colour, and I said, look, it's a uniform colour, but that's not the colour that you've chosen to do it in. And that again was sort of causing difficulty, because he basically said there's not a lot more I can do with it. And I think that a large part of the problems stem from the fact that I thought he did this sort of thing quite frequently, but he said to me that generally speaking, this is simply not the scale that he works at, because normally he's asked to do much bigger recreations for things like the Milton Keynes Science Fiction Museum, which I've been to. And obviously they have really big display areas, really big display models, which is the sort of thing he does day to day. So going down to this sort of scale was not the sort of thing he normally does. So that was perhaps a misinterpretation on my part. But because I knew who he was, and I'd sort of seen his work at Cromford before, I thought he'd be a safe pair of hands, which obviously he is. But I'd attributed my knowledge of the show to him because he builds science fiction stuff. Therefore, I thought he'd know B5, and I don't think he particularly did. But that's an assumption on my part, and assumptions are what lead to mess ups, basically. So anyway. I sent him some actual screen grabs from the show, and I said, look, this is what the front end of the station looks like. And I think he understood then why I was sort of, and I said to him, I had to hold my own hands up here as well, because I said to him, we'd agreed that he would build it sort of out of the box, so to speak. Now, combined with that, he said he was going to look at the source material, but I did say to him, build it out the box. So he applied the stickers that were in the box, and I hadn't really thought about that, nor had I thought about the fact that the stickers wouldn't actually be enough to reproduce it as it appears in the show, and they're not. That's the thing, because the stickers are well short on the front end. They're well short of the amount of coloration that there is in the show. So what he'd quite reasonably done, he'd done the whole thing and sort of added colours. And then this is, had he not done what he did, this would be almost uniformly grey. So, as it is, it does have more detail than would have been the case had it just had the stickers applied to it. There's no quibble about that. It's just kind of unfortunate in the sense that, not being a model maker myself, I hadn't thought to be that prescriptive about what I expected to see, because I expected to see something that was show accurate. And the model itself, the model kit itself, is not quite show accurate. Although looking at it, it's really good. The actual detailing is really good. Where it fell down, I think, was in using stickers. If someone just applied the stickers and assumed they were done, that's not actually enough to get it show accurate. That's the difference. I'm just thinking as well, this should spin. Does it spin? Oh, it doesn't spin. I thought it span. I haven't actually. I've barely dared touch it since I got it. But I thought that was supposed to spin. Well, perhaps it would, but perhaps he's had to paint it in, or perhaps he just glued it because he didn't realise it was supposed to spin. I don't know. And this, as I say, this is the problem. I think had I realised, maybe I should have taken a stab at it myself and had it painted after the fact by somebody else. I don't know. But it's just these little things where, if you know the show and you know what's going to irk you, I would say the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, that's not what I thought I was going to get. And at the end of the day, it's a commission. It feels like quite a grown-up thing to do. So you expect a certain level of sort of output back. And he obviously thought he'd done a decent job. And the thing that really irked me about it, and I have to get this off my chest, is that he said to me, I put it on my Facebook group and they really liked it. And I had to do the virtual equivalent of biting my tongue, because I just thought, yeah, but I'm your client. It doesn't matter if other people like it. I have to like it because I'm the one paying for it. It's like, anyway, I've got that off my chest now. Thank you. And that was just part of the difficulty of it for me, was that I think it was just a sort of disconnect between him being used to do much bigger things and probably getting zero negative feedback from it, versus me asking him to do something which is produced by CGI and therefore is identical every time it's done and effectively sort of perfect because, they've done it in exactly the same way every time. And that's, I think, is a very difficult thing to then reproduce in real life, unless presumably you're doing some sort of 3D print that's also going to paint it for you. I mean, that's the struggle, isn't it? I haven't even looked at this sort of really, really close up. I'm going to take some pictures of it and put them up as part of the video, perhaps at the end. But it's ironically, he's even sort of done it so that and again, I didn't even look at it closely on the day, if I'm perfectly honest, because I just wanted to sort of get it and go, really. But he's not even aligned the front docking bay in a sort of horizontal way. I personally would have gone for that. It doesn't matter because it does spin, it's supposed to, so it doesn't really matter. But I thought the entire section span. I'm pretty sure that it was designed to spin, and there's nothing particularly stopping it from spinning, apart from the fact that I suspect that he's glued it in such a way that it doesn't. And again, that probably comes down to him not being that familiar with the series. Because he thought a really, really big ship could dock in it. I said, no, it's only shuttles that go in the front. And he was like, oh, right. So it's just these little things. And I'm just sort of looking at the Cobra bays. It's like, yeah, they're there. But it was funny though, because until I'd actually looked at it closely myself on the sort of on the show, I wouldn't have said exactly where the blue started and stopped. And at a distance, if you just glanced at it, it's a good reproduction. The stand's quite nice as well. And is obviously he's done a nice job with the stand down the bottom there, but it's just unfortunate that I had a particular mental image of how it was all going to go, and there were going to be zero problems and it was all going to be fine. And the moral of the story, I think, is to make sure that the stuff that you're assuming because you are familiar with the particular show, for God's sake, get it down on paper or talk to the person and make sure that they're clear on what your expectations are about what you're going to get at the end of the day, because they may simply not know it as well as you do, and therefore they're not going to have the same expectations. And other case in point, and I knew this was going to happen. I thought, given how this has gone so far, I know exactly what he's going to say when I ask him this question. And I said to him, "Did you keep the box?" To which the answer was no. And I knew the answer was going to be no. Why did I know the answer was going to be no? Because I hadn't asked him to. To him, it was just a box. Now, I've learnt a lot over the past year and a half, and this was something I actually originally got from Gareth, from Cosmic Toys. It's one of the first things I ever bought from Cosmic Toys. And, it was the thing that I saw that immediately drew my eye, and the basic model itself was not cheap because there aren't many of them anymore. And, fundamentally, this is in no way a poor quality job. It's just that I had to battle to get there, and that taints it a little bit, which is unfortunate, And I then I also thought, am I just being a complete arse here? Because this is something else I've mentioned on the channel before now in terms of judging scale on eBay auctions. If you're unfamiliar with the item you're looking at, because when I looked at the messenger images again, I realised that on the table that he was showing me this on, there was a pencil, and this sort of front area was in no way huge, because it was just the eraser on the end of the pencil was clearly a fair chunk of this area that was screaming at me off a small screen, but it was taking up a big chunk of the small screen. So it felt to me like, oh my God, it's this massive area that's wrong, and it wasn't. It was a small area that was not right. But because it was on a small screen and it was kind of zoomed in, you can't help but notice stuff. And that was what part of the problem was for me, was that it was that area that I felt wasn't right was just being called out to me. Which the amount, as I say, for the money I was paying was just frustrating, basically. So yeah, I mean, I think there's, it's easy to say these things and observe these things in hindsight. It's always the way of it, isn't it? And I should just shut up and enjoy the model. I know, I get that. But I learned a lot about myself in the process, I have to say, because I didn't think I was going to be that fussed about it not being quite right. But I think that am I more of a perfectionist than I thought I was? Well, I don't know, maybe, but by the same token, I just sort of expected that if I was paying someone to do a specific thing, I would get a decent job right out of the box, so to speak. And then, obviously, the plus side is I took quite a good video, which I'll link to now, before I sent it off. So I've got a good record of what the box had looked like, and so that's already captured on the channel. So fortunately, I kind of covered myself for that eventuality. Part of me must have known that was going to happen, and I did it, and I got the video capture of what it looked like before it went off. So that's fine, and I can get myself past that. And as I say, I knew that was going to happen. I think it just highlights the fact that there is a big difference between someone who's doing this as a job, and it's a task to get done, and you move on to the next client, and that's it. Whereas obviously for the client, for someone like me who doesn't have millions in the bank, this is a relatively expensive undertaking for me personally. So as a result, of course, the output means more to me. So he may well think that I am the most irritating client ever. But what can I say? It is what it is. That's what I was hoping for. And it wasn't quite as smooth as I would have hoped. And it's been a long journey time-wise to actually get to this point, to have it back, to be able to show it to you. And it's quite interesting as well, because he was saying to me that he couldn't sort of light it because it would be too small scale to light, and it is small scale compared to what he normally works with, and he can't actually understand why they did it at this scale. It would warrant a much bigger scale, and I do take that point. But ironically, I have seen people on YouTube who have managed to light it, albeit I can see it would be a real pain in the backside to do it, because there isn't a lot to play with in here. But again, that is what it is, and for me personally, I'm content just to have it as is. I say I'm just a little bit surprised that it's not spinning, because I'm pretty sure it was supposed to spin. But I probably shouldn't go away and confirm that, because I'll just get even more annoyed. But anyway, but as I say, if you didn't know the show, you wouldn't understand that. That's the thing. So again, had I been more specific, I wouldn't have thought that there would have been a way in which you would build it that it wouldn't then spin, if you see what I mean. But perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps it's not supposed to spin. I don't know. And as I say, perhaps in my haste to sort of give it to and try and get the process started, I should have just taken a moment, done a bit more research. I mean, ironically, I now know people who probably could have advised me on other people who might have done it differently. But I just went with what I knew at the time. And so again, perhaps a lesson learned there is, do a bit more research around whether or not there are other people available who could tackle this sort of thing. And also, I just hadn't to put two and two together and thought, actually, he normally does much bigger stuff. So what I need is somebody who normally does smaller stuff. And that's on me for not having sort of shopped around, so to speak. But I just thought it was such an unusual thing to have as a skill set, to be able to actually find somebody who you could pay to do this on your behalf. I didn't really think much more of it, and I just sort of went for him because I'd seen his stuff before. You kind of go with what you know, don't you? That's your tendency, I suppose. So it's a lesson learned for me. I mean, I don't think I'd ever, if I got one of the Star Furies or something, I'm not sure they'd be massively bigger. I mean, they wouldn't be anywhere near in scale with the station, for example. But Revell did do Star Furies as well. But there was so little merchandise for Babylon 5, relatively speaking, that having something like this is the exception rather than the rule. You just don't get loads of this sort of stuff for Babylon 5 at all, which is a great shame. So that's why I was keen to have this as a sort of quite unique reminder of the series for myself, as much as anything else, you know? So lessons learned, but I think it will look nice displayed. I think I'll probably try and find a case to put it in, just to make sure it doesn't get too much UV and stuff like that, because he did say that it would fade, potentially stickers will go with time. So I'm not proposing to put it in a room that has any sort of direct UV source in it, because that would be a bad thing, I think, it has to be said. But if you've got any recommendations for bespoke case makers, that would probably be quite useful, because obviously I can measure it up. I don't think it's more than about a foot long. It's not huge, so it just needs to be kept relatively safe, if at all possible. That would be good, because the last thing I want is anyone knocking it off, and that would be a distinct waste of money. So yeah. So that is the story of the last Babylon station that I will ever have produced for me, I think it has to be said. But, as I say, it's lessons learned all round. I don't think Richard will be quick to accept another commission that is at this scale either, always for a CGI show even. I think that the older school of models obviously lend themselves to this sort of recreation, because that's how they were physically represented on the screen. So you can't really go wrong there, can you? Because, it is what it is. But whereas with CGI, if it's not absolutely bob on, people will, unfortunately, will sort of call it, because obviously it's just different to what they're expecting. So, yeah, it is what it is, isn't it? So anyway, I say I'll throw some images up next for you to have a look at, and I'll see you soon. Cheers for now.